start this off by saying that I apologize for disappearing. I know it wasn't for very long, but still. Where I'm at currently in my life, I feel like I need a break. I think most people can relate to the feeling I have right now of, I guess, being on a hamster wheel of sorts and just constantly having to do something. There's always something. I saw a tweet that said, "Sum up adult life in one phrase," and someone quoted it and was like, "It's always something." And that is, unfortunately, my experience of adult life thus far. And it's funny I say that, I mention adult life, because I am officially 33. 33. Because it's my birthday, you guys have to automatically like the video, whether you watch it or not, whether you think it's good or not. You have to give me a like for my birthday. Anyway, back to what I was saying. I've just felt like I've spent so much time trying to get settled and solve this issue, or take care of that thing, or get whatever done. And I've also been doing a lot of internal work, which is, if anyone's done any internal work, you know how heavy that is. And I haven't actually taken a real vacation in the last 3 years. It's just been constant surviving. And even though I had like bouts of unemployment, anyone who's been unemployed knows that it's not actually anything like taking a vacation. It's the most stressful time to be. Being unemployed is stressful as fuck. But yeah, so I haven't actually had a vacation, thanks to the unemployment combined with starting new jobs, which means you never build up any vacation time. So you just keep starting over, and I just kept working, and that's what I've been doing. And as much as I love making these videos, as much as I love my baby, I have been feeling a lot of pressure to create, and I haven't really been feeling any inspiration as far as videos, and I haven't been taking time to do yoga as often as I was before, and I've been feeling very disconnected. And it's hard to create from a place when you're running on empty and you're not even really paying attention to your thoughts or checking in with yourself the way that you should. And so I will be taking the next few weeks to relax, take care of myself, practice in a way that is just for me, to remind myself of how I ended up doing this in the first place, which was a whim after walking past a yoga studio and thinking, I've always wanted to do yoga. And suddenly here I am with a whole YouTube channel centered around my practice. I want to remember, it was almost euphoric, honestly, the feeling of connecting with myself and only myself. And I want to get back to that, especially as I age so swiftly age. I find myself wanting more than anything to just be with myself and my thoughts and figure it out. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I will also be taking that time to work on ideas for my Patreon, which I have one video there, and I have a few ideas and things put together that I'm going to be posting eventually after my vacation. I need a break. I'm going to take one. But already I've been writing more. Like, my journaling went from the artist way, 3 pages of writing, down to like a sentence here and there every few days. And already, because of me taking that time for myself, I've been writing more. And not just journaling, but also more creative writing, which I haven't done that since I was a kid. I really thought I was going to write a book when I was a kid, and I had all these plans and I never followed through on it, and I don't think I'm going to be publishing anything, but it's been nice to just be creative and not take it too seriously and just get back to that. I am also very much looking forward to the end of the Capricorn and Pluto influence on my life. So if you're not into astrology or whatever, this is probably going to sound like a bunch of gibberish for the next who knows how long. But the planet Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn for the last 15-16 years, and it is finally shifting into Aquarius. It's new energy, which is dope. And thinking about that was basically half my life. So thinking about the last 15-16 years, I was graduating high school around that time. And now here I am, a whole grown lady, and Pluto is finally moving forward. Well, not yet, because it's currently retrograde in Capricorn, and it's going to be there until mid-November, I think. But still, the energy is already shifting. And as someone with a Capricorn stellium, I have definitely felt the Pluto and Capricorn influence very heavily, and I'm more keenly aware of it in the moments of its ending than I have been. Well, I wasn't really into astrology like that back then, but I'm definitely feeling more aware of how heavy Pluto and Capricorn has been. And so I'm looking forward to that energy shift. And just the energy shift in general of me calling myself out on my bullshit and trying to tighten up where I can. I almost didn't make this video, but I finally bullied myself into doing it, and I figured my birthday is a good enough excuse. It's not my fault that I'm not a fan of communication. Nothing is ever my fault. Just so we're clear, this is my channel. I make these videos, so I decide that nothing is ever my fault. It's other people's fault. And so my lack of communication skills is because I was raised by a Libra who was raised by a Cancer. All I know is feminine wiles and subterfuge. I shouldn't say that. No, if you know any Libras and you know any Cancers, I'm not wrong. Let's be for real. This is just a line of terrible astrology. Cancer, Libra, Virgo, come on. What even is all of that? Anyway, and I can say that about Libras because I do have a Libra placement, so I have one. But yeah, I didn't want to just take the time off and not say anything. And also, I had a read with me that I wanted to share. And even though I just posted one, you're getting another one. It's like a hybrid. It's a ramble and a read with me. You're welcome. It's a twofer. But, anyway, I'm glad that I took this time to sit with you guys and my thoughts. And I hope that something came out of it. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for sitting with me. And thank you for hopefully sitting with me through this vacation, the first in 3 years. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day and that you are well. I'm reading from Evie Wood's The Lost Bookshop. I began to read the book at night. There was something sacred about those quiet, dark hours that made it feel special. I lit some candles, despite Madame Bowden's repeated warnings against it, and arranged some cushions on the floor. It felt a bit like a seance at times, because the strange noises in the walls wouldn't stop until I settled down to read. The branches spreading across the wall were now freeing themselves from the plaster, and I half expected to find leaves growing. Instead, a new book appeared. Normal People by Sally Rooney. The book I had seen at the library. It was Madame Bowden. I didn't know how she was doing it, but with her theatrical background, anything was possible. It was quite sweet, actually, her quirky ways of encouraging me to read. If only she knew that I was carrying someone else's story on my skin. Another line had come to me that morning while I was polishing the floors. I knew my mind wouldn't rest until it was inked on my skin permanently. I had no idea what this story meant, how long it would be, or whose words they were, but the biggest mystery was why they were being told to me. I could never tell anyone. Hearing voices was definitely still frowned upon as far as I knew. But that was just it. I wasn't hearing a voice as such. The words just showed up. A Place Called Lost was a much simpler story to understand, and it seemed to be written for children, which suited me fine. At least in children's books, nothing terrible happened, and if it did, it always got fixed by the end. It told the story of an old library in a remote Italian village. It was so remote, in fact, that it was said only people who wandered off the beaten track and became hopelessly lost could find it. A charming wooden building, it held ancient volumes stacked from the floor to the ceiling, arranged without apparent order. A charming wooden building, it had ancient volumes stacked from the floor to the ceiling, arranged without apparent order. The guardian of the library was so old that no one could remember a time when he had not been there. Yet one day, as he locked the outer gate at the end of the day, a violent storm blew up out of nowhere, and the poor old man was hit by lightning. However, that was not the end of the story. Still, wayward travelers would stumble across the faraway library and, despite the guardian's absence, would find themselves drawn to a certain book and, upon reading it, find the course of their lives completely changed. It was as though the library itself, the very fabric of its being, could intuit which book would help a lost soul to find their true path. But the locals feared what they did not understand and wanted the library destroyed. They believed that the building was haunted and that spirits were trapped within the pages of the books, waiting for a reader to set them free. And so it was that the books were taken out and dispersed across the land. But before the building was knocked down, a young man on his honeymoon arrived with a proposal. He would take the wood to build his own shop in Ireland. I knew this story was no mere coincidence. In fact, sometimes when I slowly read the enchanting lines of each page, I felt as though my entire life was an elaborate plotline that would now somehow make sense. But in this context, in this place, and with these people. Henry. I could already feel my ability to read him fading, and I knew what that meant. My judgment was becoming clouded with that one emotion I could no longer afford to have: love. Before I blew out the candle, I read a line that made up my mind. In the story, there was a young woman who came to the library, miles away from her true home. She read a story about a girl who had come to a fork in the road and was so afraid of making the wrong decision that she stayed where she was, huddled in the hollow of a tree. After several days, an old woman came along and told her a riddle. She asked, "What is something you create, even if you do nothing?" The answer was a choice. Choosing not to do something was still a choice. I was choosing not to register for college because I was too scared. What I hadn't realized was that I was actively choosing to stay stuck where I was, which scared me even more. The following morning, I rang the admissions office and arranged an interview for the very next day. I felt empowered, strong, terrified, and excited. There was no going back now, I assured myself, and hardly thought anything of it when the doorbell rang after I had served Madame Bowden her breakfast. I opened the door with a spontaneous smile on my face, which fell the moment I saw him standing there. It was too late to run. Besides, he had that look about him, the remorseful one where he would promise me a brand new start. I spotted the crumpled bouquet of flowers in his hand, even they looked brittle and half-hearted. I knew the routine. We had been through it so many times before. I felt my body becoming heavier as I came closer to him, the weight of being around him already crushing me. "How are you?" he said bashfully, head lowered, all innocence. "What are you doing here, Shane?" He opened his mouth to speak, but then an overriding thought came to me. "How did you find me?" "A mate of mine was up for the day shopping with the missus. He spotted you." "Where?" "On Grafton Street." So, I was trying to calculate it in my head. How did he know I lived here? Did he follow me? Was it Mitch? I didn't even have to ask. I knew it was Mitch. He was Shane's best friend and would have thought nothing of spying on me. "Look," he said, taking a step closer, which caused me to step back. He seemed visibly upset by this, as though my fear of him was an overreaction on my part entirely. "Martha, does it matter how I found you?" "It does, actually. Do you think it's normal to have your goons following me around?" "Mitch isn't a goon, Jesus." A couple walked past and gave us a wary glance. "Can we go inside?" he asked. "I just want to talk." I didn't answer. I wanted to say, "No, go away, leave and never come back, forget about me, pretend I never existed." But nothing came out. I just turned away, looking at the street. "Your mother hasn't been well." My head spun around to look at him. "That's why I came. She wants you to come home. What's wrong with her? Is it serious? Serious enough she's in the hospital. Jesus Christ. My hand flew to my chest. It was as though all of the oxygen had left my body. I felt woozy, like nothing was real anymore. Not the buildings or the street or my flimsy life here in Dublin. He took my arm and I no longer flinched. It was Shane. He knew me and I knew him. Regardless of what had happened between us, he was here to help me. I looked in his eyes and I could see the sadness that was there when his father died. He knew how I felt. He wanted to help. Okay, come in, I said. I walked down the hall towards the stairs leading to the basement, but when I turned around, he wasn't following. I live in the flat down here, I said, pointing to the stairs. Geez, it's a nice place here, isn't it? He said, putting the flowers down on the console table and wandering into the front room. You can't go in there. He stepped out of my eye line. After a few moments, I followed him in. Madame Bowden was out, so I figured there wasn't any harm. Was it an accident, or is she sick? I asked. What? Oh, it's cancer. My legs went weak and I sank back on the sofa. I couldn't believe it. I felt like a waking nightmare. Why didn't she tell me? I didn't expect him to answer. I was simply trying to make sense of it. How could she? None of us knew where you were. You didn't even leave a note, Martha. I was so worried about you. Were you? I knew I shouldn't have said it. I could read his face like the weather, and that comment made him angry. A flash of him beating me with the head of a mop came unbidden. My arms wrapped around my ribs instinctively. He turned his back on me, and he walked slowly around the room. You've done all right for yourself, though. I can see why you might have forgotten your family. It's not like that. This was so twisted. I felt myself needing to prove that I still loved him, just to keep things civil, but I didn't love him. I hated him. I stood up and walked towards the door that led to the hall. Where are you going? I'd better pack a few things. What hospital is she in? The regional. He had delayed just a beat, but enough to raise some doubts. Who are you? I heard Madame Bowden's imperious voice from behind us. She was standing in the doorway that led back to the parlor. I hadn't heard her come in. I had to fight the urge to hug her for her impeccable timing. She held her walking stick more like a weapon, waiting to be wielded than a support. Another friend of yours? Oh God, don't say it like that. This is my husband, Madame Bowden. I was shivering all over. I didn't think anything bad would happen while she was here, but I couldn't be sure. Husband? Good grief, you kept that quiet. I wish she would shut up. She was making everything worse. I was immobilized. The past and the present were colliding in the front room, and no one seemed to understand how terrifying that was. They continued to exchange barbed pleasantries, and I just stood there, my mind racing to nowhere. I found myself wishing that Henry was here. Well, we best be off, Shane said, walking towards me and taking me by the arm. I remembered this, how it looked normal, because no one could see him digging his fingers into my skin. Oh, where are you off to? Somewhere nice? Bewley's do a lovely lunch menu. Back to Sligo. Martha's mother is in the hospital, so I'm taking her home. Madame Bowden looked genuinely sad, although I couldn't tell if it was sympathy for me, or for the fact that she would have to make her own breakfast. She was unpredictable in her moods at the best of times. Kind and gentle one minute, cold and uncaring the next. I couldn't rely on her to get me out of this. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, she said, her eyes lowering to where his hand grasped my arm. I have to pack some things first, I croaked, my voice breaking. There's no time for that now, we have to beat the traffic. I said I'm sorry to hear that because Martha can't possibly leave today. No, I'm afraid I have a very important supper this evening and I cannot do without her. I'm quite sure she can make her own way there in the morning. You have a very reliable public transport system. she added, enjoying how he visibly squirmed at her interference. Her mother is seriously ill. I think that's more important than your supper or whatever. I looked from one to the other. I didn't know what to do. I would like to hear Martha's opinion on the matter if you don't mind. She was giving me breathing space, and I had to grasp at least until I could find out for myself what was going on. I'd better stay here for tonight anyway, I said, despising the pleading tone in my voice. 5 minutes was shade and I was already back to the frightened girl hiding in a wardrobe. I hated him for making me this way, but I hated myself too. Why couldn't I be stronger? He shook his head and widened his eyes in disbelief. Nice to see where your priorities lie. It is my job, Shane. I'll call home tonight and be on the first bus down in the morning. There, you have your answer, Madame Bowden said, stepping in front of me. Don't call the house. There's no one home, obviously. It seemed as though he was giving up. What else could he do with her here? He took one last look around the place and filled his mouth with saliva and spat on the floor before walking out and slamming the front door. My lungs exhaled and I realized I'd been holding my breath for who knows how long. The relief of his absence was spoiled only by the embarrassment I felt in front of my employer. I'll clean that, I said, reaching into my apron pocket for a cloth and walking away quickly so I could hide my tears. Martha Winter, you'll do no such thing, she commanded. I think it's time you told me exactly what's going on. I'm following a new lead. The sigh on the other end of the line was not open to interpretation. I'm just wondering, is all of this really worth it, said Isabel. I gave my own version of the frustrated sigh. She had no idea. How could she? I'd been cryptic about my research for so long that she'd lost interest in asking. It's worth it to me. Fine. Well, I suppose there's no point in me saying that I miss you. It hardly seems relevant to you. Of course it's relevant. I really miss you too, Izzy. And there it was, my first lie. Or rather, the first lie that I was blindingly aware of, like staring into the sun and seeing the worst part of yourself eclipsed. I didn't want to be the kind of person who simply told someone what they wanted to hear, but I didn't know what the truth was anymore. Or maybe I did, but I didn't know what to do about it. I was stalling. Did that make me a bad person? Your mother called. What? My mother called you? Yes, Henry, she is going to be my future mother-in-law. If we ever get married, that is. I gulped. She said your father's checked himself into rehab. I'm not sure how many seconds passed by. Henry, are you there? I cleared my throat. It felt thick with something I was determined to suppress. Yep, I'm still here. Well, are you going to say anything? This was typical of my mother, using someone else to deliver the news she should have told me herself. I hated her and pitied her at the same time. She was always hiding behind someone or something. Perhaps she was ashamed of the whole thing. I know I was. What is there to say? Am I supposed to be impressed? He'll sober up for a fortnight, maybe 3 weeks at a stretch. Then, just when we're starting to believe that he's changed, he won't come home one night, and that'll be the last we hear of him for another few years. It's always the same. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I made a fist of my hand and smacked my forehead. What was I thinking, saying this stuff to her? No, I'm sorry. You shouldn't be caught in the middle of this. I'll have a word with Mom and I'll be home soon, I promise. I spent 20 minutes trying to schmooze the archivist at Princeton University on the phone. My definition of schmoozing was leaning heavily on my British accent and hoping that made me sound important. As it turned out, my schmoozing skills were either rusty from lack of use or highly overestimated by me. Sir, you are welcome to visit the reading rooms here. Simply make an appointment. Yes, I understand that it's just not fiscally feasible to make that kind of journey at the moment, I said for the third time. As much as I would have loved the trip to New York, I could hardly afford the bed and breakfast as it was. Is there any chance you could, have a little look through Sylvia Beach's letters for any correspondence with an Opaline Carlyle? So you want me to drop everything I'm doing and do your research for you? Is that correct, Mr. Field? Now, when you say it like that, as I said, you can submit an online request like everybody else to consult the special collections. Yes, but time is of the essence. It is, Mr. Field. My time is of the essence, and I've spent as much as I am willing to on this phone call. Goodbye. I stared at my phone. I think that went rather well, I told myself, and grabbed my wallet off the bed. When I got to the front gate of the university, I saw her. Fancy meeting you here, I said, and wished I thought of something more original to say. Thankfully, she didn't notice. Her face looked paler than usual, and her eyes were bloodshot. Had she been crying? Is everything okay? Yeah, fine. People were bumping into us as she stood motionless before the entrance. Are you going in? Her eyes started about nervously, then she shook her head. I don't know what I'm doing, to be honest. Well, let's just step out of the way, I suggested, hooking my arm through hers and guiding her to a quiet corner inside the quadrangle. I don't know what I'm doing here. I think I changed my mind, she said, looking around with wide eyes like a trapped animal. Can I help at all? It was clear that she wasn't even listening to me. Her mind was elsewhere. I thought my mother was ill. I can't speak to her on the phone and my father won't answer my calls. Not since... She broke off. Not since she left her abusive husband? What kind of family would do that? I texted my brother. He said she was fine. Must have been a misunderstanding. That's good news. I couldn't understand what was going on, but she was clearly upset about it. Fancy a walk? You'd be saving me from a boring afternoon in the library. This was a blatant lie. Libraries were anything but boring to me, but I knew it's what people said sometimes, and to my relief, she nodded. I didn't really know where we were going, but sensed that it mattered little to her, as long as it was quiet. We wandered off the main thoroughfare and down the quieter streets with independent shops and honest cafes. I found the Holy Grail, a second-hand bookshop with a tea room upstairs called Tomes and Tea. I waited until she had a pot of tea and a scone with extra jam in front of her before I spoke again. We're friends, right? She nodded non-committally, towering a spoon of light cream on top of her scone. And friends can tell each other stuff. No judgment. Henry, But they can also not tell each other stuff, but still lean on the other person, if they want to. So what I'm saying, in the most ham-fisted manner ever recorded in history, is, whether you want to tell me or not, that's up to you. But I'm here, either way. Until you find your manuscript. Yes, well, she could see right through me. I had nothing to offer her. Even this olive branch of friendship was a flimsy substitute for how I really felt. If we're being honest, I can't understand why you would propose to someone and then immediately hop on a flight to another country searching for something that probably doesn't even exist. That was not the kind of honesty I had in mind. You're hardly in any position to lecture me on my love life, I flung back, then immediately regretted it. I didn't mean... Her chair screeched on the floor as she got up. Her eyes were burning with hurt, and maybe even hatred. I hated myself. What a stupid comment. I ran down the stairs behind her, quietly asking her to wait without wanting to attract attention. Walking through the bookshop, she happened to step into an anteroom by mistake, and it was just us two alone. Please, Martha, I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking. It was a stupid throwaway comment. She was looking towards the ceiling, trying to stop the tears from falling. It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have said those things. I was being unkind. You were right, I said, stepping closer. I did run away from Isabel. Not consciously, perhaps, but I found a way to not be there. I don't know, I said, raking my hand through my hair. I thought it was what I wanted, and then I just freaked out. The shelves of books around us muffled the outside world. Wisps of blonde hair fell about her face, and her red cheeks glowed with the turmoil of emotion. She bit her lip and leaned back against the bookshelf, considering her words. Love is scary. Someone should write that book. I'm gonna stop here, and I hope that you guys have a good rest of your day and that you are well. Thank you so much for sitting with me.